time, there lived a young woman named Imani in the bustling city of Nairobi. Imani was well loved by everyone who knew her. Her bright smile could melt the coldest heart, and her laughter was like a melody that lingered in the air. One evening, after a long day at work, Imani returned to her apartment and found a small gift box placed neatly at her doorstep. She paused, puzzled, and looked around the corridor, but no one was in sight. Curious, she picked up the package and stepped inside. As she set the box on her coffee table, she searched for a note. Inside was a sleek, crystal perfume bottle with a golden nozzle that caught the light and shimmered like a treasure. The only message she found was a card that read, *, may the aura of this perfume bring you the attention you deserve. *. Imani chuckled softly, thinking it might be a kind gesture from a secret admirer or an appreciative client. Intrigued, she unscrewed the cap and sprayed a small amount on her wrist. The fragrance was enchanting, a rich blend of lavender and amber that seemed to wrap around her like an embrace. She closed her eyes, letting the scent wash over her. But within moments, her nose began to itch, and her throat felt tight. Her head throbbed faintly, and she dismissed it as fatigue from the day's work. Placing the bottle on her dresser, she decided to get some rest, hoping to shake off the strange sensation. When morning came, Imani woke up feeling different. There was a heaviness in the air, and her reflection in the mirror startled her. Her vibrant eyes now looked distant, and her usually radiant skin seemed dull. Brushing it off as a bad night's sleep, she carried on with her day. But as the hours passed, unsettling things began to happen. Strangers stared at her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Some even whispered as she passed by. Her colleagues acted unusually distant, their smiles strained. At first, she tried to ignore it, but the eerie feeling grew stronger. By evening, Imani couldn't shake the unease. She returned home and reached for the perfume bottle. It seemed to shimmer more brightly now, almost as if it were alive. A chill ran down her spine. Something about it wasn't right. Who had sent it? And what kind of attention was it supposed to bring? Imani's hands trembled as she realized the gift was more than just a thoughtful gesture, it was a curse waiting to unfold. There was a terrible smell in Imani's bedroom, sharp and offensive, and she couldn't help but wonder where it was coming from. Wrinkling her nose, she made her way to the bathroom to freshen up. But as she stepped inside, the stench intensified, and to her horror, she realized it was coming from her. Did I step in something, or worse? She muttered, her face twisting in disgust. She jumped into the shower, scrubbing herself furiously with soap until her skin turned red. But no matter how hard she scrubbed, the smell wouldn't go away. It was foul and persistent, a sickening mix of rotting garbage and stagnant water. Imani sprayed herself with deodorant and perfume, desperate to mask it, but the odor clung to her like a curse. When she got to work, the reactions were immediate. People whispered behind her back, and some even pinched their noses. "Is something rotting in here?" one colleague murmured as another wrinkled her nose. Imani's heart sank when her closest friend at the office, Aking, approached her. Covering her nose discreetly, Aking said softly, "Imani, I think you need to see a doctor. Something seems off." The shame was unbearable. Imani fled the office in tears and rushed home, determined to bathe again. She scrubbed herself over and over, emptied bottles of body wash, and even tried soaking in scented oils. But it was useless. The smell only grew stronger, a relentless cloud that surrounded her. By evening, she was a sobbing mess on the couch. When her boyfriend, Kelechi, knocked on her door, she hesitated to let him in. But she desperately needed comfort, someone to tell her it would be okay. The moment Kelechi stepped inside, he gagged, his face contorting in horror. He tried to mask it, but the stench overwhelmed him. "Imani," he said, struggling to speak through his disgust, "what's going on? Did something die in here?" Imani's heart shattered. She had no answers, only an unbearable humiliation and the suffocating realization that the cursed perfume had changed her life forever. "Imani, what's that smell?" Kelechi asked, his face twisted in disgust as he stepped back. Imani's eyes brimmed with tears. Kelechi, please. I don't know what's happening to me. He held his nose tightly, gagging as he fought the urge to vomit. You smell like something crawled out of the grave, he said bluntly. What did you do to reek this bad? His words were like daggers to Imani's heart. She reached out to him, pleading, please don't leave me. I need you. But Kelechi shook his head, taking another step back. Until you fix, whatever this is, I can't be around you. Without another word, he stormed out, leaving her alone in her misery. Imani collapsed onto the couch, overwhelmed by shame and heartbreak. She didn't know who else to turn to, so she called her best friend, Zuri. A few hours later, Zuri arrived, finding Imani in a broken state, her face streaked with tears. Zuri hugged her briefly, then pulled back, her nose wrinkling. Imani, I'm here for you, but what's going on? This smell, it's unbearable. Through sobs, Imani recounted everything that had happened, from the mysterious gift to the moment she sprayed the perfume. She pointed to the bottle sitting on her dresser. It's the perfume. I know it is, she said, her voice shaking. Zuri walked over to the dresser and picked up the bottle. Its crystal surface sparkled innocently, as if mocking them. She studied it for a moment before making a decision. If this is the source of your misery, then it's time to get rid of it. Without hesitation, Zuri hurled the bottle to the floor. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, and the liquid inside evaporated instantly, leaving behind a faint hiss. The room grew eerily silent as the two friends stared at the shattered remains. Imani felt a strange lightness in the air, as if the curse had lifted, but the smell still clung to her skin. Do you feel any different? Zuri asked, watching her closely. Imani shook her head. No, not yet. The two women exchanged worried glances. The perfume was gone, but the nightmare might have only just begun. The golden shards glistened under the dim light of the room, but the putrid stench still hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It's gone now, Zuri said softly, turning back to Imani. Whatever curse was in that bottle should be broken. But the smell persisted, clinging to Imani's skin, hair, and very soul. She wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. Zuri, what if it's not just the perfume? What if it's me? Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. Zuri hesitated before pulling Imani into a hug, wincing slightly as the foul odor overwhelmed her. No, Imani, it's not you, she said firmly. We'll figure this out together. You're not alone. That night, Zuri stayed with Imani, offering comfort as best as she could. Imani cried herself into an uneasy sleep, her mind weighed down by confusion and fear. In the middle of the night, Imani stirred awake to the sound of faint whispers. She lay still, listening intently. I'm so happy it worked, Zuri said, her voice low but filled with a strange satisfaction. Thank you for helping me plan this. I couldn't have done it without you. Imani's heart raced as she froze in place, her breath catching in her throat. Who was Zuri talking to? What did she mean by it worked? Quietly, Imani lay back down, pretending to be asleep as Zuri ended the call. From the doorway, Zuri stood watching her, and for a brief moment, Imani caught a glint in her friend's eyes, something cold, calculating, and unrecognizable. Imani squeezed her eyes shut, her mind racing with questions. Could Zuri have done this to her? Was her friend behind the mysterious perfume? By morning, Imani heard Zuri leave the apartment in a rush, her footsteps hurried. The urgency only heightened Imani's suspicions. As she sat alone in the stifling silence, the stench still clinging to her, Imani's thoughts churned. What had Zuri done? And why? She knew she had to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Hours passed, but Imani couldn't shake the memory of Zuri's whispered phone call. She sat alone in her living room, her thoughts spiraling, when a knock at the door startled her. With trembling hands, she opened it to find Kwame standing there, a familiar smile on his face. Kwame was a man from her past, a kind soul who had once confessed his love for her. Though she hadn't felt the same, they'd remained friends until life led them in separate directions. It had been 2 years since they'd last seen each other, and Imani was stunned to see him. Kwame's smile faltered as the stench from inside her apartment hit him. He covered his nose instinctively before stepping in. Imani, what happened here? What is that smell? Imani's composure broke, and she collapsed into tears. It's me, Kwame. It's all me, she cried. Kwame guided her to the couch, sitting beside her, despite the unbearable odor. Tell me everything, he said gently. Through sobs, Imani poured out the whole story, the mysterious gift, the cursed perfume, the stench that clung to her, Kelechi's cruel words, and how her life had unraveled in mere weeks. When she got to the part about Zuri, her voice trembled. Kwame, I think Zuri knows something. I think she did this to me. Kwame's brow furrowed in confusion. Zuri? Your best friend? Why would she do something like this? I don't know, Imani whispered, her voice cracking. But last night, I heard her on the phone. She said, I'm so happy it worked. Then, when she thought I was asleep, she stood over me, just staring. It felt wrong, Kwame. Like she was enjoying my pain. Kwame's expression darkened, and his jaw tightened. If Zuri's involved, we'll find out. I'm not going to let you go through this alone, Imani. For the first time in days, Imani felt a flicker of hope. Kwame's presence was like a lifeline, and she clung to it. But deep down, she knew the road ahead would be filled with answers she wasn't ready to face. Kwame stayed silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful before he spoke gently but firmly. Imani, don't jump to conclusions just yet. Zuri is your best friend. You don't want to accuse her unless you're absolutely sure. If you're wrong, you could ruin your friendship forever. Imani nodded, though doubt still gnawed at her. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Imani couldn't stop replaying Zuri's actions in her mind. The way Zuri had smashed the perfume bottle without suggesting they analyze its contents felt rushed, almost like she wanted to eliminate evidence. That evening, as they sat together in the living room, Zuri said something that sent a chill down Imani's spine. Sometimes, losing everything is the only way to see who truly cares about us. Her tone was calm, but the words felt loaded, as though she were admitting to something. Imani couldn't hold back any longer. She turned to Zuri, her voice shaking with anger and hurt. Zuri, enough. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. I need to know the truth. Zuri raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. What truth are you talking about? Imani took a deep breath, her hands trembling. You smashed the perfume without even inspecting it. You've been acting strangely ever since, and the other night, I heard you on the phone saying you were happy it worked. And then there's the way you look at me sometimes, like you enjoy seeing me like this. Did you do this to me, Zuri? Are you the reason my life is falling apart? For a moment, silence filled the room. Zuri stared at Imani, her lips curling into a bitter smile. You really think I'd do something like this to you, she said, her voice calm but laced with something dark. Imani's heart pounded as she searched her friend's face for answers, but all she found was an unsettling coldness. The bond they once shared now felt like a fragile thread, ready to snap. After everything I've done for you, you dare accuse me of this? Zuri's voice was sharp, trembling with anger. I've been there for you, Imani. When everyone else left, when Kelechi walked away, when your life started falling apart, I stayed. And this is how you repay me? Staying doesn't mean you're innocent, Imani fired back, her voice unwavering. Zuri's face twisted with fury. She grabbed her purse and stood abruptly. I won't stay here and let you accuse me of such evil. You've changed, Imani. You're not the friend I used to know. Without waiting for a reply, Zuri stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. Moments later, Kwame arrived to find Imani curled up on the couch, tears streaming down her face. She's gone, Kwame, Imani whispered hoarsely. She didn't even deny it. She just walked away. Kwame sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Sometimes, silence is an admission of guilt, he said gently. But we'll figure this out, Imani. You're not alone in this fight. In the weeks that followed, Kwame stood by Imani's side. They visited doctors, herbalists, and even traditional healers, but nothing worked. The stench persisted, growing stronger, and with it, Imani's spirit weakened. One evening, Kwame approached her with new hope. A friend of mine told me about a powerful seer. He's helped people before, and he's agreed to visit you. The next day, the prophet arrived, an elderly man with piercing eyes that seemed to look straight into Imani's soul. He took one long look at her and sighed deeply. You carry a curse, my child, he said solemnly. A curse placed by someone close to you, someone who envies you and wants to see you broken. Imani's voice trembled as she asked, Is it Zuri? The prophet nodded, his expression grim. Her envy runs deep, and her actions were fueled by bitterness. But curses can be undone. If you're willing, I will help you. Imani's heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. She glanced at Kwame, who gave her an encouraging nod. For the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope returned to her eyes. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady. Tell me what I need to do. Yes, it was your friend, the one you trusted the most, who caused your suffering, the prophet said solemnly. But her curse is not permanent. He handed Imani a small vial filled with a thick, amber liquid. Drink this, he instructed. It will burn, but it will cleanse you. Imani hesitated for only a moment before drinking. The liquid seared her throat, and soon, her entire body felt as though it were engulfed in flames. She screamed as her skin prickled and burned, but just as suddenly as the pain began, it stopped. The air around her felt light, fresh. Imani inhaled deeply and froze. The stench was gone. She turned to Kwame, her voice trembling with disbelief. It's gone. The smell is gone. Kwame pulled her into an embrace, his own voice thick with emotion. You're free, Imani. It's over. In the weeks that followed, Imani's life began to return to normal. Her energy returned, her smile brightened, and her spirit seemed to glow again. Kwame stayed by her side, his unwavering support blossoming into something deeper. One evening, Kwame knelt before her, holding a small ring. Imani, will you marry me? Imani's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded without hesitation. Yes, Kwame. Yes. Kwame beamed with delight. I can't wait for you to meet my mom. She's going to love you. The following weekend, Kwame brought Imani to his mother's home for dinner. The evening was warm and welcoming, and Imani easily charmed his mother with her kindness and grace. After dinner, Kwame turned to her. Wait here, my love. I just need to have a quick word with my mom. Imani nodded and settled into the living room. As she reached for the television remote, it slipped between the cushions of the sofa. She reached down to retrieve it, but her hand brushed against something strange. Curious, she pulled it out, a small, familiar bottle of perfume, its golden nozzle glinting in the light. Imani froze, her blood turning cold. The bottle was identical to the one that had cursed her. She turned it over in her hands, her heart pounding. What was it doing here? She heard footsteps approaching and quickly hid the bottle. Kwame re-entered the room, smiling warmly. Everything okay? Imani forced a smile, nodding, though her mind raced with questions. Was this a coincidence, or had the curse followed her into this new chapter of her life? As Imani unfolded the crumpled paper she found beside the sofa, her heart sank. It was a receipt for the cursed perfume. Her hands trembled as she read it, her breath catching in her throat. The name on the receipt was clear, Kwame. The room spun as the realization hit her. Kwame, the man who had stood by her side, who had comforted her and won her heart, was the one who had given her the cursed gift. Just then, Kwame walked into the room. He stopped in his tracks as his eyes fell on the receipt in her hand. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Kwame, Imani's voice cracked, barely a whisper. You bought the perfume? You did this to me? Kwame sighed heavily, running a hand over his face. He took a tentative step forward. Imani, I can explain. Explain, she snapped, her voice rising with every word. Explain how you cursed me? Explain how you watched me lose everything and stood by as if you cared? How you let me think Zuri did this? How could you? Kwame's shoulders slumped, his face etched with guilt. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Imani, he said quietly. I wanted you to see me. To need me. Her tears flowed freely now, anger and heartbreak mingling in her voice. You destroyed me, Kwame. My job, my dignity, my friendships, you watched me fall apart. Why would you do this? Kwame's hands trembled as he spoke. Because I loved you, Imani, he admitted, his voice breaking. I've loved you for years, but you never noticed me. I was always the good friend, the one you never considered. I thought if I made you vulnerable, if I showed you that I could protect you, you'd finally see me. Imani stared at him, her disbelief turning into cold fury. So you cursed me? You went to a prophet and had him place a spell on me? Kwame nodded, shame shadowing his features. I didn't think it would hurt you this much. I just wanted you to rely on me. I wanted to be your hero. Imani's voice turned icy. You don't hurt someone you love, Kwame. You don't destroy them just to make them yours. Kwame reached out to her, but she stepped back, her eyes blazing with pain and anger. Imani, please. I made a mistake, but I love you. No, she cut him off. You don't love me. You love control. You love the idea of me needing you, of being helpless without you. But I'm not that person anymore. Imani turned and walked out of the room, the weight of her decision crushing her, yet freeing her at the same time. Kwame called after her, but she didn't look back. She was done being a victim. It was time to reclaim her life. As Zuri pulled away from the embrace, she sighed deeply, her face softening. Imani, there's something I need to tell you, she began, her tone cautious. That night you overheard me on the phone, I wasn't talking to someone who wanted to hurt you. Imani frowned, her curiosity piqued. Then who were you talking to, Zuri? Zuri looked down briefly, then back at her friend. I was talking to my aunt, the herbalist I had consulted about your condition. I told her I was happy because I thought the perfume was destroyed and you'd finally be free from the curse. Imani blinked, stunned. So, you weren't part of this? Zuri shook her head firmly. I would never hurt you, Imani. I was trying to figure out how to help you without scaring you more. That's why I smashed the perfume that day. I thought destroying it would break whatever spell was on it. Tears welled up in Imani's eyes again, this time from relief and guilt. Zuri, I'm so sorry for doubting you. I let my pain cloud my judgment. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Zuri hugged her tightly again. Stop it, Imani. You were going through hell. We've been friends for too long to let this break us. I'm just glad you're okay now. Over the next few weeks, Imani worked on piecing her life back together. She resumed her work, rekindled old friendships, and found joy in the little things again. As for Kwame, she never heard from him again. It was as if he had vanished, leaving only the painful memory of his betrayal. But Imani refused to let his actions define her future. Surrounded by love and support, Imani realized that true strength comes from enduring the darkest times and finding light again. She vowed never to let anyone dim her shine ever again. It was her brother who had been planning a surprise birthday party for their mother. That evening, as their mother's birthday arrived, Zuri decided to stay with Imani instead, knowing her friend still needed support. Meanwhile, Zuri's brother had called to inform her that their plan had succeeded, and she was overjoyed to hear the news. Imani, sitting beside Zuri, felt a deep sense of regret for all the accusations she had made. Her heart ached with guilt, and she couldn't help but apologize again. Zuri, ever forgiving, smiled and reassured her, It's okay, Imani. I know you were hurting. I'm just happy you're doing better now. And so, the bond between them was mended. With Zuri's unwavering support, Imani started to rebuild her life, brick by brick. She found a new job, reconnected with old friends, and began to look forward to the future with a renewed sense of hope. Through everything she had endured, Imani learned a tough but valuable lesson, that some gifts, no matter how beautiful they may seem, should be carefully considered before they are accepted. Not all gifts are given with pure intentions. Most importantly, she learned that true love is not about control or manipulation. True love is about supporting, lifting up, and healing each other. It's about care, trust, and respect. And so, Imani's story became a testament to the power of forgiveness, the strength to rise again after betrayal, and the importance of being cautious with the people and gifts we welcome into our lives. I hope you enjoyed the story.